Hello everyone, this is Jerry Frazier, and today I'd like to do a painting of Lake Como from my terrace. This is the scene that I will be painting, the Bay of Venere in Leno on Lake Como in Italy. This is the canvas that I will be using. It's 36 inches by 51. And this is the palette that I use, prismatic colors, or the colors of the rainbow, very similar to the palette of Monet. You'll recall from part 1 that we break the painting process down into 4 painting stages, an oscillation between line and color, and also that there's a 5th stage called composition, which is a line stage, in which we use charcoal. It's a dress rehearsal, and we will be wiping off the charcoal. So let's begin with composition. We begin with gesture, or a line indicating movement or rhythm. This enables me to look at the subject, which is very big and in 3 dimensions, grab the entire thing and place it on a canvas which is in 2 dimensions. So for example, here's our subject matter. The white line that I indicate here is approximately the movement or gesture that I'm seeing. So I'll use that line to grab the whole thing and place it comfortably on the 2-dimensional canvas. It helps me compose. It's the first step of our composition. Should I go forward in oil? In this case, my answer is no. I've placed the subject matter too high. Let me try it again. It's very important to establish a sense of movement and rhythm right from the beginning, because if we don't establish rhythm at the beginning, it won't be there at the end. Now, the movement that I'm talking about could be anywhere you see it. It could be the way the mountain comes down, it could be the shape of the bay, it could be the line around the flowers that I indicated earlier. Whatever you see that gives you a feeling of movement, use a gesture line to establish that movement. There's a second step to the composition stage, and that's where we place a line indicating a separation of value. So now I'm using a darker line right over the top of the gestural lines. And I put a line where I see values separate. We've discussed this in part 1 and part 2. Remember, the composition stage asks the question, should I go forward in oil? And now that I've established a composition that I feel happy with, the answer for me is yes. So now I begin in oil. This is called the construction. And like the composition stage, there are 2 steps. And like the composition stage, those 2 steps are 1, gestural lines, and 2, lines indicating a separation of value. So the student will ask, why do you want to repeat something that you already did? Well, in fact, I'm not repeating. I'm not looking for ghost lines that are left over from the composition stage. But the composition stage was tentative and exploratory. Now I'm more confident. I know where the thing is going, so these lines have more feeling. Robert Brackman used to say that we make most of our mistakes in the first 10 minutes. So it behooves us really to use a piece of charcoal before actually going into oil to establish a composition. That way we can get off on the right foot. It would have been a mistake to make a commitment to the very first charcoal lines that we drew. The composition stage, however, did help us find our way, and so it is now using oil that our commitment really begins. This really, in effect, is the birth of our painting. We have movement, the lines indicating a separation of value give us a feeling of light, and again, this is called construction. Now we're going to move from line to full color. It's a color stage, and it's called underpainting. The technique we are using is called scumbling, where we hold the brush at the very end. I'm slowing it down so you can see it, and using just the side of the brush to create a very, very thin, dry layer of paint. You will recall from parts 1 and 2 that this very thin layer is like breath on glass, as Whistler said. My teacher would call this kind of color, veils of atmosphere. Another thing to notice is that I'm scumbling just in the darks, because we will move from the darks to the middle values, and we'll leave the light values open or blank canvas. So if someone asks me, what am I painting? I'm painting the darks. I move around within the darks. I do not see the thing before me. I'm just looking for color, subtle color, breath on glass, veils of atmosphere that I scumble in, moving from dark to light. The virtue of scumbling a very, very dry layer of color is that it enables us to scumble one patch of color over another, or one veil of atmosphere over another. So the underpainting is literally a painting that will exist under the final painting, and when we get to that, we'll explain how you allow the underpainting to come through. This gives your painting a great deal of complexity with regard to subtle color and a certain freshness and depth, given that you will be looking through the final painting down into the underpainting. Everything is relatively light. The values are correct, properly related, but because we began on a white canvas, the painting emerges out of that white universe. This means that the underpainting is high key. When we go into the next color stage, we will drop it down in value. Let's look closely now at the underpainting, and you'll see that I left the lights open, meaning you see the canvas coming through where there are light values. It's rather abstract. We have scumbled into the lines. We don't look for results. We just enjoy our vision, enjoy the color. Notice the subtlety of color. That's what it's all about. It's a color stage. So this is our underpainting. Remember, we started with a construction, and we scumbled in the dark values, then the middle values, and we left the lights open or pure canvas. Now we need to go back to line, and that stage is called reconstruction. In reconstruction, we think the same way we did as in construction, which is to say we squint and look for separations of value. But this time we're using a very dark line, a mixture of alizarin, ultramarine blue, and viridian. And so therefore the lines are so dark they seem to sit on top of the underpainting, and they make the underpainting look very weak in color. This is intentional. We want to undo the underpainting so that when we go to the next stage, which is a color stage, we will have to push the color in order to bring it back into balance. Remember that in the underpainting we lost the line, so now we're reinserting it. It gives us a sense of form or structure, much as would the armature in a sculpture or the framing within a house. It also affords us an opportunity to correct our drawing, to adjust our drawing. This is called reconstruction. So now we move from the line stage, reconstruction, into another color stage. This stage is called painting. I place one stroke of color against the next. I leave a lot of the underpainting coming through. The strokes are governed by the feelings I have as I respond to my vision, as I respond, in this case, to the darks. You can see that I'm painting into the reconstruction line. I'm losing the line. I will move from darks to middles to lights, just as I did in the underpainting. But whereas I left the lights open in the underpainting, now we will paint into the lights in the final stage. Again, my strokes are governed by my response to the sensation of color. It's so important to understand that I do not see houses or flowers here. Now I'm in the middle values. I just respond emotionally to the colors that I see. Here's a photograph of the final painting in the same area, higher resolution, so you can better see the nature of the brush strokes. Again, I'm still in the middle values. I see nothing before me except color, and I stay within the middle values moving around. Sometimes my stroke is kind of sweepy, trying to get that feeling of atmosphere. Sometimes it's very staccato. Sometimes I attack the painting. Sometimes we caress the painting. Again, this is a photograph of the final painting in that area. I am carried along by the painting, by my vision. I move from darks to middles to lights, but in many ways, I'm not sure when I will stop or where I am going. Let the whole process unfold. The key here is just to enjoy your vision and to respond to the sensation of color. Now I'm moving into the lights. I try to keep my strokes open in such a way that the underpainting comes through. You'll see here that my painting strokes are a kind of dancing over the surface. I am not looking for results. I'm not trying to make something look like a house or a tree. I'm just responding to color. It's a color stage. Here you will see in this photograph of that same area in the final painting how varied the strokes are, atmospheric color. So therefore, the painting is complete in every stage. I could stop anywhere along the line and frame it. Just as you would enjoy the company of a young child or a middle-aged person or an elderly person, the painting becomes more developed as we go further. And we go further if we choose to and if we have more to say. But it's always complete throughout, which means that throughout, colors and values are properly related. We just establish that unity, that harmony, and we go further if we choose to. We do not draw with the color, we place the color. Keep in mind that as this method asks us to see line and then color, and then line again and then color again, and because we get everything through line and color, we're never confronted with the problem of having to make something look like something. That's very stressful. Instead, the process is driven by pleasure, the pleasure of the line that we see, the pleasure of the color that we see. Here's the final painting. So let's go through it again and remind ourselves of the stages that we went through. This is the composition stage. Gesture, lines indicating a separation of value. We established a composition. And then we began in earnest, going into oil. Again, gesture, lines indicating a separation of value. That was called construction. Then we moved to color, the underpainting stage, in which we have a sense of atmosphere. And we scumble the darks, and then the middles leave lights open. But then we had to go back to the line in reconstruction because we had lost the line. This sets up the painting stage, which is the final color stage. And in the painting stage, we place one stroke of color against the next. We paint into the darks and then into the middles, and for the first time, we finally paint into the lights. Remember, painting is not about making pictures. It's about expressing who you are, becoming more of who you already are. That's the fulfillment, that's the rush. Get to the rush, and the painting will follow.